It was one of those nights when the world felt too heavy for one man to carry. Rain lashed the streets, neon lights blurred behind the glass windows of the small diner, and in the corner booth sat Ethan Hayes, a single father with tired eyes, a half-empty cup of coffee, and bills stacked in his worn-out wallet. His little daughter, Lily, barely 6, dozed off beside him with her cheek pressed against his arm. The diner's warmth barely held back the chill that had settled into his life since his wife died 2 years ago. He wasn't supposed to be there that night. He was supposed to be home fixing a broken heater, but fate, it seemed, had other plans for him. If you believe in kindness, fate, and second chances, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Because tonight's story will remind you that one act of compassion can change an entire life. Ethan had been waiting for his order when a loud commotion erupted near the counter. A woman in an elegant black dress stumbled forward, clutching her throat, gasping for air. Her jewelry sparkled under the fluorescent lights, but panic had drained all color from her face. People froze. No one moved, just horrified stares and whispers. Without thinking, Ethan shot up, gently laying Lily across the booth. He rushed to the woman, wrapping his arms around her as instinct and memory from an old first aid course kicked in. A firm thrust, yen, 2, and a piece of steak flew from her mouth onto the floor. She collapsed into his arms, trembling, gasping, crying. When she finally caught her breath, her teary eyes met his, soft brown eyes filled with gratitude and shock. The woman looked like she didn't belong in that place. Designer heels, diamond earrings, and a perfume that spoke of wealth. Yet, in that moment, she looked fragile, human, scared. Ethan just smiled faintly and said, "You're okay now." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks as the entire diner erupted into applause. But while others celebrated, Ethan quietly slipped back to his booth, lifted his sleeping daughter, and left before anyone could even ask his name. He didn't do it for attention. He did it because it was right. He had learned that kindness was the only wealth he could still afford to give. The next morning, Ethan returned to his job at a small auto repair shop. His hands, rough and cracked, told stories of struggle, endless overtime, unpaid bills, and nights spent fixing cars just to keep the lights on. Lily would wait in the corner of the shop, coloring pictures of her late mother while he worked. He loved her fiercely, and every bolt he tightened, every tire he changed, was for her. Days passed. The woman from the diner faded into memory, like a brief moment of grace in a life filled with storms. Until one afternoon, a sleek black limousine stopped outside the shop. The neighborhood was used to rusty pickups, not vehicles that looked like they belonged to another world. The door opened, and a man in a crisp suit stepped out. He was tall, imposing, and carried an air of authority that instantly silenced the workshop's usual noise. "Mr. Ethan Hayes," the man asked, scanning a paper in his hand. Ethan nodded, wiping grease off his hands. "Who's asking?" The driver extended an envelope. "I represent Miss Evelyn Hart. She asked me to deliver this personally." Ethan frowned in confusion. He didn't know any Evelyn Hart. The driver's tone softened as he added, "Miss Hart said you saved her life." Realization dawned like lightning. The woman from the diner. He opened the envelope, inside of which was a handwritten letter. The elegant script read, "You didn't ask for thanks. You didn't stay for recognition. You simply helped. I owe you more than words can say. Please allow me to meet you once again. I'd like to repay your kindness properly. Evelyn Hart." Tucked inside was a business card with an address printed in gold. It belonged to one of the city's most exclusive estates, the kind of place you only saw in magazines. Ethan felt torn. He didn't save her for a reward, but something about the sincerity of her words stirred him. That evening, after putting Lily to bed, he sat at the small kitchen table, staring at the letter. The heater hummed weakly, dishes piled in the sink, and rain tapped against the cracked window. He thought of his late wife, Grace, and how she'd always said, "Kindness finds its way back to you, Ethan. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday." The next morning, he took Lily's hand and boarded a bus that wound through neighborhoods he had never stepped into before. Glass towers replaced old brick buildings, and lush gardens lined every street. When they arrived at the mansion gates, even Lily gasped. The estate looked like something out of a dream. The same driver greeted them and led them inside, where sunlight poured through tall windows onto marble floors. Evelyn Hart descended the grand staircase, radiant yet humble in her smile. Up close, she looked younger than he remembered, perhaps in her early 30s, but her eyes carried a wariness that hinted at a life that wasn't as perfect as it appeared. She knelt before Lily, complimenting her drawing of flowers she clutched in her hand, then turned to Ethan. "I didn't even get to say thank you," she said softly. Ethan simply nodded. "You don't have to. Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone," she replied quietly. "Most people just watched." She invited them to lunch, and though the table was covered with delicacies Ethan couldn't name, she made sure to keep the conversation gentle. She asked about his life, his work, and his daughter. When she learned about his late wife and the struggles he'd faced, her expression darkened with quiet empathy. "You deserve better, Ethan," she said almost to herself. "People like you remind me that goodness still exists." Before they left, Evelyn offered him a job, a mechanic position for her company's fleet vehicles, with double the pay he currently earned. Ethan hesitated. It felt like charity, and his pride wrestled with gratitude. But when he looked at Lily's worn-out shoes and remembered the bills on his table, he accepted. From that day forward, everything began to change. Ethan's life slowly transformed. Steady income, new clothes for Lily, warm dinners instead of cold leftovers. Evelyn visited the garage sometimes, always kind, always asking about Lily's school or bringing her small gifts. There was something different about the way she looked at them. Like she wasn't just a wealthy woman helping a struggling father, but someone searching for something she had lost long ago. One evening, Evelyn arrived late, looking exhausted. She sat on a stool near Ethan's workstation, watching him work in silence. Then, almost whispering, she said, "My parents died when I was 16. Everything I own was built from what they left behind. Money, fame, success. It all feels empty when you don't have someone waiting for you at home." Her voice cracked as she glanced toward Lily playing nearby. "You have something precious, Ethan. Don't ever lose it chasing more." He didn't know what to say. He just nodded, feeling the weight of her loneliness beneath her polished appearance. Over time, their friendship deepened, not through grand gestures, but small, quiet moments. She'd drop by to help Lily with homework, or they'd share dinner at Ethan's modest home, laughing over simple meals. The walls that separated their worlds began to fade, replaced by warmth neither of them had expected. But life, as always, tested kindness. One afternoon, the garage caught fire due to a faulty fuel line. Ethan rushed back inside to save a co-worker trapped beneath a collapsed beam. He managed to pull the man free, but flames engulfed his tools, his savings, and everything he had built. When the fire department finally contained the blaze, Ethan stood outside. In shock, Lily clinging to his leg, soot streaking his face. His job was gone. His only source of stability had turned to ashes. That night, as he sat in the darkness of their apartment, unsure what to do next, a knock echoed on the door. When he opened it, there stood Evelyn's driver once more, holding an envelope. Inside was a single note. "You once saved me when I couldn't breathe. Now, let me be your breath when you can't stand on your own." Attached was a key to a small house on the outskirts of the city. Evelyn had bought it under his name, fully paid. Ethan was speechless. Tears burned in his eyes. Pride, gratitude, and disbelief collided inside him. He went to see her the next morning, intending to refuse the gift. But when he entered her office, Evelyn's expression silenced him. "You taught me what humanity feels like again," she said. "Let me do this for you. Not as charity, but as a thank you for reminding me how to live." For the first time in years, Ethan allowed himself to cry openly. Weeks passed. The new home became their sanctuary. Lily had a garden to play in. Ethan had a small garage to start over. And Evelyn visited often. She and Lily grew close, sharing laughter that filled the house with warmth Ethan thought he'd never hear again. Somewhere between gratitude and friendship, something deeper began to bloom, unspoken but real. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Evelyn joined them for dinner. Lily ran around the garden, chasing fireflies, her laughter echoing through the air. Evelyn watched her, then turned to Ethan. "You know, I spent years surrounded by people who only cared about my wealth," she said softly. "But you never asked for anything. You just gave." Ethan looked at her, the fading sunlight reflecting in his eyes. "Maybe that's what love really is," he said, giving without expecting. Her eyes glistened with tears as she smiled, reaching for his hand across the table. "Then maybe it's time I start giving too." From that night on, Evelyn became more than a benefactor. She became family, not in wealth or title, but in heart. Lily began calling her Aunt Evie, and the three of them built something beautiful out of the broken pieces of their pasts. Sometimes, life gives you miracles disguised as ordinary moments, a dinner. Gone wrong, a simple act of courage, a stranger who turns into hope. Ethan never imagined saving a woman in a diner would lead him to a second chance at happiness, but it did. Because kindness, once given, always finds its way home. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep telling stories of love, hope, and second chances. And before we end, tell us in the comments, do you believe one act of kindness can change someone's life forever? Because Ethan and Evelyn's story proves, sometimes that's all it takes.